Okay, well, we have our next panel, which is on TOD and world-class high-speed rail stations. And we're proud to have a great lineup of speakers here, quite a variety. And I'm going to introduce the moderator, Chris Lineberger, and then he'll take it from there. Chris Lineberger is probably, I don't know if anyone's called you this yet, but I would call him the father of TOD. Has a long history in the real estate industry and doing research on TOD development, TOD trends. He's written books on this. And so he is probably the best person to have here to talk about how America is really embracing TOD in a big way and how integrated rail is with that. So with that, take it away, Chris.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Andy also told me that this was by far the best panel of the entire program. So you're really smart to be here. What I want to talk about is sort of the end result of what we're trying to do here. That what we're attempting to do is literally build the future. If we can get the slide up. And high-speed rail is obviously a real big part of this future that we're building because it's a fundamental shift over the last 15, 20 years as far as how we've been investing in the built environment. The built environment is, by the way, a mere 42% of the wealth of any developed society. It's the largest asset class by far. That's why when we get the cold, the entire economy gets sick and there's a recession. But what we're talking about here, though, is the end product of all this infrastructure, and that is creating walkable urban theirs. And we just released a study. This is my tech startup Places platform and Smart Growth America, looking at the top 35 metros in the country. We look at that 42% of the wealth of any society and divide it into the only two forms that it takes. Form number one is drivable suburban, low density, everything's segregated from one another. The only way to get around is by cars and trucks. Way number two is walkable urban, how we've been building cities for 10,000 years. But we got away from that, and particularly in this country, over the last 70 years. Walkable urban's higher density, multiple transportation systems to get you there, hopefully rail transit and high-speed rail as part of that. But once you're there, it's walkable. And walkability is about 1 kilometer in length, half mile or so, which then defines these places and makes them much more compact. So we looked at the top 35 metros in the country and found that the walkable urban land, that higher density, mixed use, rail served, is a massive 1.2% of our land in those 35 metros, 1.2%. Obviously, the rest is drivable suburban. 98.8% of our land is low density drivable suburban. Now, we in this country have gone really way far, but when you go out to the fourth beltway outside of Paris, not much different. We then looked at how much GDP is being created in this 1.2%. It was a mere 35% of the GDP production in these 35 metros come from that 1.2%. Obviously, the balance, 2/3, is in the other 98% of the land use. This is critical economic development, and it's also what the market happens to want. What we've learned is that walkable urban real estate is worth 35 to 50% more than drivable suburban on a price per square foot basis. The market wants it. It's growing in market share, while drivable suburban is losing market share, and it obviously makes a huge impact on the GDP. So the question is, what about, what's the end game for high-speed rail? And in my mind, one way is that it's merely an entry point into a major metropolitan area, just like an airport. And there's all sorts of barriers that are created as far as encouraging nearby development. In fact, sometimes you have to look at some of our train stations that we built, and you really have to call them LULUs, locally undesirable land uses, that they're required, but they're a pain in the ass. as far as all the folks that are within walking distance or even driving distance. Second is that it's a symbolic anchor of a place. I consider these fireplaces. Every living room has a fireplace, right? How many times do you stoke up your fire? Very little, but you arrange everything in your living room around the fireplace. So the high-speed rail station can be a fireplace, but other than that, not much use. The third is to be the focus of a regionally significant place, a major economic generator that really creates a there. And that is to me, the highest aspiration for a high-speed rail station. What it takes is obviously integrated urban design. You can't turn your back on the rest of the area around the station. Number two is crucial, place management, the fifth level of governance in our society. Already takes the form of a business improvement district. And the third, of course, is exciting design. You gotta, really make this a vibrant, exciting, mixed-use place. So I'd like to end by sharing with you a 75-second summary of this research that we just released that the World Economic Forum did. So if you could please run this. So this is what we're trying to do with high-speed rail. And this is the goal of high-speed rail, is to help create vibrant, economically productive places. So I'd like to turn to Augustin to share a little bit about what Germany has accomplished with their high-speed rail program, and particularly focusing on what might happen around their stations. Augustin.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. For the next minutes, I will be sharing with you some DB Deutsche Bahn best practices around stations, and under the focus or with the point of view of our three key players at stations, which are the customers, the operators, and finally the city where we serve into. All right, here we are. Stations shall operate following customer-focused service approach. All stages of the customer journey, while approaching, entering the building, circulating across the facility, we at OEB world-class stations shall provide for our customers valuable assistance services. Moreover, passengers moving across operational areas in or out of the station shall have easy access to valuable and reliable mobility-related products. Specifically about station architecture design, it shall enhance riders' experience, allowing for intuitive, efficient, and safe navigation across the facility, targeting platforms immediately, experiencing welcoming train hall configurations, wide spaces, clear sites, convenient interior conditions, and easy circulation arrangements. We at DB have an average of 20 million visitors daily. World-class high-speed rail stations are part of those visitors and users of our facilities. And these facilities are often located in downtown areas, in the mid of the urban fabric of cities, offering safe and secure areas where to work, shop, rest, meet up, and also be socially present and active. So high-speed rail main stations are also meant to provide complementary services like retail, office, hotel facilities, in addition to the mobility services at any time of the day, facilitating an efficient and sustainable use of time while improving the travel experience. I would like to go very shortly to the DB business case that we have, and under the discussion about rail stations versus shopping mall. DB operates more than 5,400 stations. Retail spaces account for half of the station's footages. Groceries, boutiques, amenities open for business 7 days a week, along 20 revenue hours, make a difference, increases customers' satisfaction. DB 2021 retail and leasing business results show some $300+ million revenue, confirming the economic model that I'm here presenting. Even during the dark hours of the COVID pandemic impacting the service, stations remain profitable, self-sustaining, and covering most of their operations and maintenance costing. When it comes to the operator view, second key player here in this first envision approach, Berlin Central in Germany provides transit services to 500,000 passengers daily, operates more than 1,000 trains a day, and is placed among the top 10 best European rail stations. Since 2006, started operating. The interchange and crossing station configuration still claims to be a state-of-the-art facility with good accessibility and strong intramodality, operating different transportations modes simultaneously. Moreover, I would like also to talk about the future of stations and their digital twins. Modern high-speed rail stations of the 21st century need to run digital, fully digital. Digital service providers must be tightly interconnected with the station operations plan so that they can provide reliable information in real time about free parking spaces, what shops and services are at the stations, where restaurants are located, if the lifts are operable, wheelchair services, pre-booking, platforms and train numbers information, all of that needs to be accessible even before approaching the facility. The goal is to get the right information and the right moment, enhancing mobility in a sustainable way, avoiding congestion at platforms, preventing confusing and stress situations, minimizing safety hazards, and reducing accident risk, saving your time and a long walk to find your seat once you board your high-speed rail train. Let me refer very briefly to the station design. As architect, engineer at DB, we like to approach the platforms on time and safely. The station needs to allow for a neat and clear architectural layout, design, and a solid circulation concept. Platforms need to be clear of any obstacles and vertical circulation elements to be visible and well-dimensioned to improve the customer sense of security and contribute to the distribution of travelers in the optimum case. Passenger circulations will also be monitored in real time by visual counting devices, as it happens as we speak, managing passengers' movements and crowds from the access to the egress points of the building during operational hours. And finally, let's go for the view of the city, which surrounds and is part of that our day-to-day business. Successful high-speed rail stations interact with the urban rail, which they serve as integrated transportation hubs. As we know, stations operate as triggering factors actively on the urban development contributing to create business opportunities and real estate developments for mixed use in their surroundings, stitching together disconnected areas in dystrophic developments, creating walkable working environments near residential areas in their vicinity and enhancing their surroundings. And finally, world-class stations are heavily involved in the day-to-day city life. High-end architecture design and station planning shall ensure generous spatial and iconic urban elements like prominent facades, courtyards, and outdoor areas, as the stations that we have in mind 100 years back when they really prompt into the 20th century. Around the station area, we should create spacious open areas and inside spacious interior elements as point of attraction for multiple events. High-speed rail stations become urban life activators, vivid and vibrant, hosting art and commercial installations, social and sports events, musical festivals, and much more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you can see that for those of us that love to go to Germany for all of its great urbanism, this is one of the reasons that it exists. I'd like to now have Doug Furstenberg, somebody I've known for years. Here is Doug's a local real estate developer who was sort of a dirt kicking developer until he realized after he built 3 or 4 of his major projects that he's a major transit oriented development firm that has sort of backed into it because it makes money. So Doug. Thanks.
Yes, as I get the slides up, I mean, Chris is right. When we started building in Washington, we didn't have this was in the 90s, we didn't have a name before what we did. So if those you know, the red line is the most utilized line, we just started building on the red line. And you know, thank goodness about 20 years later, they came up with transit-oriented mixed-use urban infill developer, so we could figure out what the heck we've been doing for the last
That's what we academics
20
do.
years.
We give you words.
Thank you. And so Chris was able to tell me what I did after 20 years, so that was great. So we're located in Bethesda, and what we do, 99% of what we do is inside the Beltway. And it is almost all transit-oriented, walkable, mixed-use communities. I'm going to walk you through one project really quickly here. It's probably the bell cow of smart investment in a metro station and what it can do for a neighborhood. I'll tell you the overview. The project was 2.7 million square feet. Don't ever do that much. It's really hard. And it takes a long time. But what's really most important about this project, what we did, it was mixed use. Right next to the metro station in Noma, there was no Noma. I'll show you what Noma looked like before we got there. But what's really worked is the mix of uses that the 2 gentlemen before me talked about. And as we look at where we're in America coming out of the pandemic, today the district city council voted for a huge incentive to repurpose office buildings into residential, because our downtown core is 97% commercial, Noma's 50-50. And it's a completely different. So as you were talking about mixed uses, when you're planning these neighborhoods, if you really want to do the smart thing, the mix of uses is really what Chris talked about. It's walkable. It's a mix of uses. You never have to leave. You may, but you don't have to. So we literally had 7 acres, which is a little unusual in a urban setting. We had both entrances of the metro literally coming out to the 7-acre site when we acquired it in 2006. My buildings aren't as pretty as his, but we were really focused, and it was a long time ago. But we tried to do the architecture. We tried to make it a great place for people to come to. And Noma, as you can see, that the funny shape is we had to create a business improvement district, and the way you have to do that is get a certain vote. So the way to master the vote is have very squiggly lines, so you keep the people who don't want you to have a bid out. So a very strange map. But you can see the southern anchor was Union Station. I'll show you where we were in north. There was nothing there.
The ultimate brownfield. It was dirt.
It was warehouses and dirt. So this is Noma in 2003. They built the metro station, and you can just see the infill that happened literally in about a 9-block area. The stats are really kind of overwhelming. The metro station cost $104 million. Some people say 120, who knows? It was 25% funded by the government, 50% by the federal government, which is very unusual at that time. 50% was funded by the DC government. 25% was funded by the property owners through an assessment. Our assessment was $150,000 a year. Seems cheap, but at that time, when you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, adding $150,000 a year carry for what looks like might be a 20-year project seems like a lot of money. So what's happened in Noma since 2005? Office space has gone from 6.2 million to 12.5 million. There literally were, we say zero, there were less than 100 residential units. In Noma, there's 10,000 apartment multifamily condo units in Noma with another 2,000 under construction. The retail was predominantly Union Station. Retail is, if you do mixed use development, you spend a usually disproportionate time on your retail and you get a usually disproportionate payback. If you don't have great engaging retail, you will not be successful. There were no hotel rooms in Noma and now there's over 1,500. So the assessed value, I haven't been able to get the most recent assessment, but from 2006, the tax assessment in Noma was 1.5 billion. By 2013, it went for 4.4 billion. We know over $10 billion of private development has happened in Noma in the last 2 decades. And if you just look at the district's investment of $50 million in the station, Constitution Square alone, our project, pays $20 million a year in real property taxes to the district. So when you make TOD work, it works, but it needs to be walkable. It needs to be exciting, all the things that they talked about. We're involved with another project, which will be the next, hopefully the next bell cow. They're doing another infill station. Noma was the first infill station, unplanned, put in the project. This is the second one going on in our metro system. It's about 2 miles from the Amazon HQ2 headquarters. A little difference in pricing. The Noma station was 104 million. The new station's opening up on Friday, 370 million. So it's just the cost of it, but millions of feet of development are going to happen around the station. And it's a huge public-private partnership that I think will pay off. We have about 1 million square foot project that we're opening next year, totally designed to open after the metro station opened. And then the other fun one, which has really nothing to do with TOD, but we're closing next week. Metro moved its headquarters from 600 Fifth Street to several locations around the region. And as a way to help fund their future developments, we'll be doing a land lease on their headquarters. Why would they want to sell? They need current income. So we'll be closing on their headquarters that they moved out of, and we'll be announcing a 50% pre-lease for the redevelopment tower, but it is in a location that has all the hallmarks. There's 3 different metro stations within walking distance, walkable, urban development. That's what it's all about. So that's what we do.
That's great. Love it. Love to see it. Meg Cederroth is here to give some thoughts on the joys of the California high-speed rail. First question, though, to you, Meg, is going back to what we've been talking about is when you go to the mission statement of the California high-speed rail, is it to move people and goods? Is it to make great environmental investments as far as how we move people? Is it for employment? Is it for economic development? What's the number one thing?
There's no number one thing. It's all of the above.
I know.
Yes. But what's exciting about this panel and what's exciting about what we're talking about here is it really is the manifestation of the ultimate sustainable development that will come from the system. We're making a huge public sector investment in California in these rail systems, and that is adding value and creating value in places that haven't seen this type of investment for decades, generations. And so this is really a tremendous opportunity for reshaping or reinvesting in some existing downtown cores or right on the edge of some downtown areas in order to use the investment of the system to really generate that value. And then very selfishly, as the rail operator and the public sector, we would like to, as you were pointing out, put something on top of that that allows us to capture that value in turn. Because operations can be expensive, and you do appreciate when your real estate can help you out a little bit with that. We also appreciate getting fantastic places put in place for our riders and making sure that they have the types of services and investment that makes it an attractive place to come, makes it an incredible public realm, brings you the footfall. That means the people developing in the station area are happy with the number of people coming nearby. So, it all works well synergistically. What's fantastic about where we are right now, Brian Kelly was incredibly frank about the lessons we have learned and the case study that we are becoming. What's great about where we sit now, launching into station design, which we've just begun, is we get to absorb all of this fantastic knowledge from folks like Brightline, who have been implementing stations in Florida, and from our colleagues in Germany and other rail systems around the world, and absorb those case studies into California and work really closely with the private sector as well to understand what type of development aspects can really work best at the stations that we have in place. I'm going to walk through these pretty quickly, but it's, and then there we go. So obviously there's some opportunity right here by the station for redevelopment to happen or new development to happen, transit oriented development to happen, both the buildings themselves and then the public realm that focuses you on the transit as well. So this is the city of Merced, and several years ago, they realized that by having, instead of 3 disparate rail stations, which is what they have one rail station now. They have another rail property that's coming into it. And then we also had environmentally cleared a rail station, but they were separate. And after some pretty careful coordination, some really advanced work by some of our policymakers at the state who were focusing on a state rail plan, now all 3 lines come together. And I'm sure when you think about that as a development proposition, it's very different when you have that level of coordinated ridership versus 3 different indistinct places in the city. What they're doing now is updating their general plan. What we're doing is looking at that station investment and the TOD opportunity to really help catalyze what they see as the opportunity for their density, for their walkable compact areas. And it's very heartening to see these places which, are a little tired. I think this is Fresno, which you can see ghosted into the shadow on one side is the by right 10-story development. On the Chinatown side, that's a place of historic underinvestment. It was redlined. It's the place that received no investment. And it is the place that we were asked to focus on with our station investments and make sure that they were equitable on both sides of the tracks. So you can see on this, we have a pedestrian bridge that should serve as a piece of the public realm, connecting people from the downtown side with all of its classic civic institutions and hospitals and schools to the Chinatown side, where people see a great opportunity for being a huge cultural hub and a new place of vitality and economic development. Very focused on a couple of businesses as well that are interested in creating new jobs and market sectors. So to that point about economic development, Fresno will now be 45 minutes from Silicon Valley, which is transformative when you think about who wants to locate businesses there. And it'll be about an hour and 20 minutes from Los Angeles. So it's very differently positioned with high-speed rail than without. And we respect how important the land around the stations are relative to achieving value for the city. Kings Tulare is very different. You can see this is our favorite thing to be trolled on social media about, because we do have an orchard where the station is located. We've thought about solar generation and solar panels and opportunities there. It's will be a great regional interrail hub. It does actually provide a new mode. When you were talking about your list earlier, this is a new way for people in Kings County and Tulare County to get to the Bay Area and get to Los Angeles without driving a car. They can't fly anywhere right now. So high-speed rail really is that transportation instrument that brings these people closer to much more economic opportunity as well as entertainment. And I know my colleagues talk a lot about taking high-speed rail among various sporting venues. So it is an instrument that allows you that greater mobility. And then the last station in the Merced to Bakersfield corridor, which, you know, we are very focused on getting our Merced to Bakersfield proof of concept up and running and getting passengers in these stations by 2030. Bakersfield is another opportunity very different than the others because they have decided to put the station a little bit further out of downtown, but it is also where they've done all of their vision work to focus on putting a 30-story development here, much higher, denser opportunities there. I love that smile because I think you're thinking about the underlying market conditions and how long it might take to manifest that scale of development. But having that vision there is exciting to work with. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're excited to get those riders onto high-speed rail. So I've given you the very lightning fast overview of our stations, but I'd love to hand it over to Mike.
Yes. Mike Brenninger is, of course, with Brightline, and I've been looking forward to this conversation because you're a private sector player and nobody's been building high-speed rail private sector in this country, and I'm dazzled by it. And what are you smoking?
Question. Privately, we design, develop, build, own, and operate all of our transit system as well as the real estate around it. And I think we're in a club of one, at least in the United States, of people that do that today. And I was struck listening between the conversation that we were just having between Augustine and Doug's remarks, and it reminded me of a lesson I learned a long time ago about boats, which everybody that owns a boat know that the only thing better than owning a boat is having a very good friend that owns a boat. The difference between a fully integrated transit-oriented development hub and TOD adjacent is the difference between owning a boat and having a very good friend that owns a boat. So those are experiences that I'm like recollecting as it relates to our local experiences. And so I will use as a departure point here that some experiences from our Florida operation and set aside Brightline West for a conversation maybe tomorrow. And the Florida station for Brightline is by anybody's definition, a fully integrated transit hub in the middle of a downtown urban facility. And unfortunately, it was something that needed to be tackled entirely by us as a private sector owner. There were no public sector participants in this program. It was a challenge in that it actually integrates not just our program for intercity passenger rail, but we tied together an existing automated people mover system that runs through downtown Miami, a local 3-county commuter rail operation, a soon-to-be operational additional commuter rail operation, and a nearby and immediately adjacent metro rail operation. That is all of those are publicly operated transit systems that happen to be disconnected and in the neighborhood. When I say disconnected, you couldn't get from one to the other very conveniently. They just happened to be where they were, in large consequence as a result of history. And part of that history was our own company's history. And when we started, the picture on the left is sort of what it was like in 2012 when we began. And it was 11 acres of real estate in the middle of downtown Miami that we owned and operated as a surface parking lot. Because in 1896, when the downtown population of the city of Miami was a couple hundred people over zero, it was the site that Henry Flagler laid down a railroad and built a small railroad station to be the terminus of the railroad that he built down the entire east coast of Florida. In fact, on day one of the construction of the terminal, when we were setting out to build the construction trailer from which the rest of this development was going to be managed, first thing that we had to do was scrape away a couple inches of asphalt that was on the surface parking lot. Lo and behold, what did we find? The rail that was laid down in 1896, 2 inches below the parking lot.
Ouch.
So So not only do we have to sort of integrate all this stuff, we had to integrate it on this in a site that was about 200 feet wide. So that created the need to do a high degree of integration. We built about 1.5 million square feet in a single phase, because it had to be built in a single phase, because among other things, our rail and the future rail that we integrated into the station had to be brought in 50 feet above the street level, because two of the most important downtown corridors for road traffic crossed the site. We needed to leave those in operation, which meant we had to pick trains up above them. The platform's 55 feet in the air. We built 2 levels of retail and rebuilt the streetscape of the ground floor. We then built 800 units of apartments over the top of the platforms, but in order to do that, we had to build 5 levels of parking over the platform underneath the 40-story residential towers. The top of the parking lots became a 2.5-acre amenitized sky park for the residences on top of all of that. On the north end of the station, we built a 150,000 square foot office building, the elevators for which stopped on the level that you would be able to access the transit or go all the way to the street. And then on the adjacent block, we built another office building with the parking that would supply the parking demand that would be generated out of the transit needs that we built. And we built this all in a single phase, starting in 2017. We built it in a couple of years. And so from a surface parking lot in downtown Miami, this is sort of what it looks like today. And in the immediate vicinity, from 9,000 units of downtown residential today, there's 27,000 square feet of downtown residential.
27,000 units.
Units,
Yeah.
sorry, units, right? Exactly. So multiply that by
1,000.
So there's been about 18 million square feet of TOD adjacent development that has happened on the property in either ground up developments or redevelopments in a 5 or 6 block radius of the station that we built. For our part, the real estate development was very successful from a financial perspective, because of the benefits of the transit oriented sort of nature of this. As an example, the apartment towers, we built 800 units of residences in a single phase. People thought we were crazy.
You were.
4 times too big, By the way, integrated is harder in every way. It's harder to build, it's harder to finance, it's harder to operate, it's harder to secure, it's harder in every way. It is also ultimately incredibly valuable if you can overcome all of those hurdles. We ultimately built and leased those 800 units in a year, which is the fastest lease up of multifamily residential in the history of Miami, at the highest per square foot of any residential that had ever been leased in the city of Miami. And we sold it for what was the record price for multifamily sale in the history of the Southeast United States. So it can be successful, but that doesn't make it easy.
It's not for the
Right.
faint of heart.
What's that?
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's not for the faint of heart. And so these are just a little bit of some of the images of the nature of the development of the neighborhood that has transpired in downtown Miami. And then similarly at a smaller scale in downtown West Palm Beach, we did the station, and immediately adjacent to it, we did a few hundred units of residential and some ground floor retail and parking, which was also very successful. And that transit orientation has now sparked another $2 billion of development in the immediate adjacent neighborhood, mostly by a single developer, who recognizes the virtue of the value that the transportation, injected into that neighborhood. So that's a little bit about.
So we're about to open it up for a couple questions, but I do want to go into the capital stack here and turn to Doug about why was he foolish enough, along with 4 other developers, to put $5 million into that rail station? And so somewhat akin to what you've done, Mike, but a somewhat smaller level. But why did you do that? Why did you upfront money into the capital project that was the rail station?
Because in our view, there wasn't going to be a development without it. I mean, when we look at projects that do or don't have metro, so for example, is our project near the new metro station in Potomac Yard. We could have built it before the metro, or we waited for the metro. We think that rents are probably at least 5% higher if you have metro. So, you know,
I think that's conservative. Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes yes, sometimes not. But, you know, and therefore you can justify that investment. The other part is also, when you talk about scale and quickness, absorption. If you're going to not only get higher rents, but you can build faster because of TOD generating demand. Now, when you're looking at a project that, you know, has 1 million or 2 million square feet, if you can cut that timeline in half, then that investment in creating TOD when it doesn't exist, it really does work. I think the reality is it needs to be a public-private partnership. That's when it really works, right? Because then you know the jurisdiction is invested in your success. They can also bring, in our case, they brought the tax-exempt financing. So our ability to lower that capital cost and pay it over 25 years was huge.
So Augustine, did you see any private sector participation as far as the capital stack went? And Meg, are you seeing any feelers yet out in California?
Sure, I'll be quick. We do get feelers, but what everyone wants to know is, well, okay, but when will the train system be done? Because I think there is that healthy respect for just, you know, how an integrated project would or could happen, and the need to know, okay, well, when will there be service, and will you be asking me to redesign my facility halfway through because you forgot about some critical piece of the rail infrastructure that needs to go somewhere? So we do get feelers, which is great, because the more we can, you know, inject that healthy activity in these statement areas, the better it is all around for the outcome of the system and for the outcome of California.
So Germany's further down the line, certainly. Have you seen active private sector investor, not just in their own projects, but as far as the system itself?
Sure. Maybe I can refer to Munich. It's another project that I've been involved for the last 5 years. Munich East, second station.
This is not the old station. This is the new.
It's
station.
based on an old facility, but it's completely renewed. So they were lining people at DB to participate in such a kind of investment. So there was a DB public institutional approach, and there were several partners looking into opportunities, not just for office, but also for facilities related to services, amenities. We do have also kind of heavy and strong relationship with hotels and services relating to commodities. So in this particular case, I would say you have to prepare the land and the area, as we talk, so that there is this marriage can really occur, and then a win-win effect.
Do we have any questions? We only have 2 or 3 minutes left. Please. And then
the Miami station a few weeks ago. Hear me, but I was able to tour the station a few weeks ago. But in terms of walkability, Patrick Goddard said that the first grocery store in 30 years in that neighborhood came back as a result of the transit-oriented development. So a lot of the times we like to talk about, you know, apartments and condos and all that kind of stuff. But that's a pretty cool aspect of it. The question, and I don't know who can answer this, but in terms of public agencies seeking federal funding for our large infrastructure projects and having the ability to monetize things, I know that there's some restrictions there. Do we think that there's perhaps an ability for private developers to take some of the burden away for right-of-way development around stations and things like that? Perhaps that could lower the cost to some of the public agencies that are trying to undergo large infrastructure projects.
So in the Wayback Machine, I was involved in the redevelopment of Denver Union Station, again, as a private developer. And the basic idea of that program was they had an underfunded transit program to complete a long-standing sort of penny tax driven upgrade to all of their transit systems, light rail, roads, commuter rail to the airport, all of them. But they didn't have enough money to like put the ribbon on the box at the end, which was what Denver Union Station was supposed to be. And so the idea there was, there's some real estate there. Let's monetize the real estate, take the funds from that and use it to fill the gap of the, of the funding that's necessary to complete the infrastructure. That's a great idea. Now, in fact, they had a infrastructure plan, the cost of which far exceeded the value of any degree of real estate monetization that you could do in the area. So as private developers, we threw the plan away, came up with a different transit solution that lowered the cost of the execution, and then ultimately led to that deal, which was monetizing real estate value to contribute to the cost of the infrastructure to get the public systems funded. So that is a pretty good model for how people can do that.
So you work with Mark Falcone.
Yeah, it was my partner.
Fabulous, fabulous.
I think it's the two things that you do. I mean, our cost of capital is multiples of public cost of capital. So, I mean, if we're going to really make a difference, it's bringing a new idea, a fresh way to look at it, therefore making our cost of capital not multiples of what a public entity can do. And that's really, if you're going to do a P3, that's what makes a great P3, right? How do you take a basic idea of what the municipality wants or the state wants and bring private sector ideas and discipline to it to create it? Otherwise, if you're just replacing our capital, you're just raising your cost. So it's got to be more than just capital.
We have one final question, David.
Yeah, they did save the best for last.
No question.
Can't beat that. But anyway, I'm from Ohio. They say it's a good place to be from. And it was referred to as a flyover state at one time, but they're actually bringing back Ohio is the heart of it all now. They're bringing back the old slogan. Hey, but we do send a lot of snowbirds down there to Florida, but then you guys come up there to Ohio too. But this makes total sense to me because we actually in Ohio, and I only brought one map here. That's the only reason I came is to show my map. But there are 3 sites in Ohio that were funded by Jobs Ohio that already are able to be developed. In other words, if you guys had some vacant land, you guys would probably not know what to do with it. But it connects east to west, and we can go down to Savannah, which will get you down there close enough to get you on into Florida. And we can go to, you can get anywhere from Ohio. So I'm here to promote that we maybe ought to start from the middle and go outward or go north and south. And we've got 3 lots, or the smallest one is 700 acres. That has sewer and water and all that stuff. So I'd like to at least have one of your cards here.
Of course. And
Does it
particularly
cover Mitchell's
California.
ice cream? Because if it's near a Mitchell's ice cream store, I'm all in.
But of course, talk to California because they started in the middle and went out. Thank you so much for being here. Fabulous panel. Thank you so much.
That's right. Good luck with the